everyone. Welcome back to the Growing Together podcast with me, Sunny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
A podcast where we talk about everything under the sun related to growth, becoming the best version of yourself, all of that good stuff. Today, I'm excited about this episode. Cesar never really knows what the episodes are about because I plan them for the most part. So yeah, I'm excited for this episode. But before we get started, how are you feeling this morning, Cesar?
Pretty well. I actually have whiskey coffee this morning. So
It's disgusting.
It's actually really good.
It's so bad, guys.
It's really good. I like it.
It's like for people, I don't know, I guess who like whiskey. No, I didn't like it. That's why you gave it to us.
I'm not like a super like whiskey fan, but I don't mind like an old fashioned, you know? And this actually tastes really good. They did a good job with it. So
it's like literally if you sniff this coffee, it smells like straight up whiskey. I feel like if you got pulled over after drinking this coffee, they'd be like, "Oh, you under the influence, sir."
It does. It does make your breath smell like coffee and whiskey. So there's
so
we're gonna have to clip that.
I have why? Oh.
Because that was funny.
But I have a great little pumpkin spice. It's not a latte, but I have pumpkin spice creamer because fall.
Pumpkin spice bee.
Well, it's technically not fall yet. I think it's end of September is fall, but pumpkin spice is taking the world by storm, and I am basic in that matter. Because I love pumpkin spice. But yeah, Cesar's got his whiskey coffee. How was your week? How was this week for you?
It was pretty good.
Busy.
I had a shoot a few days ago, actually, and it was really cool, really informative. I learned a lot. And also was able to, teach as well a little bit. So it was really cool to do that, So, yeah, besides that, we were editing some projects. We were here at home.
Yeah, I was just working. This week felt like it dragged on. And not like in a bad way, but you just have those weeks where it's just like so hard to focus and so hard to like just hunker down and get what you need to done. Luckily, obviously, I got what I needed to done, but it was just like pulling at teeth, like for me, like pulling at my own teeth because I just felt so exhausted and I do not know why. I cannot figure it out. But yeah, I guess we'll get into this episode. This episode idea was inspired by a show we were watching last night, and it's called The Bear.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen it. It's on Hulu. It's so good. The lead actor is from Shameless. That's I think one of his most notable roles. But it's a really, really good show. I think Cesar and I are on the 6th episode.
Yeah, I think
we watched a couple episodes last night. But what we're going to talk about is why do we hate change? And I think change is so important when it comes to growth because when you're growing, a lot of times you're changing too. You're making changes in your life. You're deviating from what you're used to. And I think so many people, me included at times, I've been in the point where I hate change. They just hate it. They hate change. And there's some kind of refusal to change in some situations. And the reason this came about is because in the episode, and you were watching it with me, obviously, it's about a restaurant and they're trying to make all these changes in this restaurant. And they have people who have worked there for years. And those are often the people that are so hard to get on board with the changes you want to make because they're more thinking, why fix it if it's not broken? But they can't see how it's broken. So yeah, that's kind of how I thought of the idea, and Cesar didn't know about it. So now, what do you think?
Yeah,
what are your thoughts?
First of all, great show, by the way. If you haven't had the chance to watch it, it's on Hulu. Again, not sponsored or anything, just shouting them out for very well shot, well scripted cinematography. I love seeing how they shoot things, but not to get really too into the weeds of the show. Relating back to that episode, I can totally see there's a specific person in the show who just doesn't see the change and why they need to do a certain thing to improve workflow or make things run better.
And it's so hard to get those people on board. I remember having conversations with my dad, and my dad specifically hates change. And my dad's 50 something, so a little bit older. And he always talks to me about things happening at work and how he hates change and how just things are changing. And I find it not funny, I guess. I shouldn't say I find it funny, but it is like kind of predictable. I figured he'd be the type of person to like not be pretty resistant to change, especially when I worked at Target, which I'm always bringing up in this podcast.
If I had a nickel every time you brought up Target, I think
honestly you'd be rich. But Target, like, while I don't ever want to work there again, it taught me so much and it opened my eyes to the world. I think you don't think your perspective can change that much from like a retail job like that, but it really did like just open my eyes to a whole different world of, I don't know, just what the world is. And when I worked at Target, I was young and I was hungry, and I was like, when I was in the leadership position, I just wanted to improve and make things better. And I would say I was pretty like into change, just because I knew to move forward, change was like necessary. You weren't going to move forward unless you kind of were flexible and adapted to the change that would forever be happening in that environment. And I remember getting so much pushback from older people that I worked with who had been there for years, who had, just had a lot more experience than I did. And I don't know if it's because they thought that I didn't know anything, or if they thought that I just was annoying, kind of. But you always had the hardest time getting them on board and almost gaining respect in that sense too. But it reminded me, watching that show last night, reminded me of my time at Target and like how hesitant to change we are as like humans. I think it's everyone at some point in their life doesn't like change. What do you think about that?
I was going to say, I would totally agree with that. I know I've been in situations in my own life, like either when I was younger, I wouldn't say even more recently, but maybe a few years ago, where like I needed to make some sort of change in my own life, and I didn't realize it until like, not like a rock bottom situation, just more of like, oh man, I need to do this because of X, Y, Z, or because of whatever specific reason. There's like that personal change, but then there's also like the change that someone may be telling you, and you may not see it. But then there also is, I think, in my opinion, there's the other variable of change is if someone's telling you to change in a specific way, is it for the right reasons, or is it more of a power grab by the individual to showcase, like, I know especially when it comes to like working in retail or whatever the case is, you get people that come in and they make little changes just to, showcase like, oh, look, this helped, or whatever the case was. And sometimes when new leadership comes in, even like from top level CEOs, companies and stuff like that, there's drastic changes that are made to, obviously improve performance. But then there's other stuff that like is just done to appease to, a certain type of organization, to be like, oh, we did X and this is what the industry's going in, and we did it that way because X, Y, Z. Even though it might have not improved performance, it was just more of like a little nice checkbox, like, to do it in that case. And some people might not agree with that type of change. They're like, wait, why are we doing this again? We're doing it for that reason. Like, how does that help our performance? How does that help us build, whether it's like a production company, like whatever the case is, like, wouldn't it be better if we just, still did it this way, but just did it this other way? But I think
there's two sides of the coin when it comes to change. There's the person making the change who, depending the situation, let's say best case scenario, they see things from a different perspective. And they see where you're currently at and where you could be. And maybe they have experience, making that shift. Mm-hmm. And the other side of the coin is the person that's, working for said leadership, and they might not be seeing the situation from the same perspective, which is why you're kind of more resistant to that change, is because you guys are in two different perspectives, two different sides of the coin. You're seeing it from your point of view, he's seeing it or she's seeing it from their point of view, and there's always, I feel like, when those changes are happening, for the most time, there's a misalignment, and that's where the resistance comes from, is lack of understanding of why these changes need to be made. But at the same time, there are situations where people come in to make these changes, and they're not coming in with all the knowledge they need to see why the changes they want to make could not be beneficial, and people at that company or in that situation may know a little bit more than this person wanting to make the changes. So they have like kind of a right to fear that change because they could see it going terribly, you know?
Yeah, no, and I guess to give an example from like my automotive background, growing up and learning technology in the automotive space, is I remember a lot of people who worked in the trucking industry, and specifically the maintenance people who were the technicians to like repair semi trucks. And a lot of the stuff that's designed around semi trucks, not to get too technical, is designed like in a computer, simulation where they animate the vehicle and stuff like that. But they never, I mean, not to say they probably have nowadays, consulted with the technician who's actually repairing the vehicle.
Yeah.
Or they make it very difficult for someone to make a basic repair. So like to do an oil change on a semi truck, you'd think it would be easy, but there's so much stuff you have to like remove and get out of the way just to get to it. And like people complain for years, like in the industry, like you guys need to see what we're doing, not just because it makes it more efficient for you to make this vehicle like, top down, right? They're like, oh, we need to make it cheaper and easier to maintain.
Yeah, so that's actually, I'm glad that you bring that up. That's actually something that I love about, I feel like I brag about the company I work for too a lot. So, but
Another
something,
nickel.
but I love about where I currently work, and it might just be because we're in a startup environment. I don't know. I hope that it stays this way forever. I'm kind of confident that it will. But when it comes to what I do, I have one other person that I work with that's the same position as I am. So I'm an SEO and content project manager. Our manager always consults us when he's thinking about making changes of like to something that would impact our workflow. And he consults with us and is like, would this be helpful? Would it not? And he goes, I'm not doing the work, so I don't know. And admitting that is so important because I think there's a level when you have leadership in some scenarios where they don't want to admit that they just don't know. And it's okay to not know. When you're in a leadership position, you're not that you're not supposed to know, but if you're managing multiple departments, for instance, there's no way that you know every inch of every department. And that's just my perspective. So it's okay to admit, I don't know, so let me consult with someone who would better understand the impact this would make. And I think that's such an important skill, is to know when you need to seek advice or guidance from other people to make sure whatever transition goes smoothly.
That's very true. Admitting that you need to learn something before like making any change.
Yeah, and I think so many people just don't want to admit I don't know, but this change is going to work, and then it just doesn't go well. So I was reading earlier today when I was looking up like, why do people hate change? It was because there's a certain level of, I think, fear, but also like a rightful fear that you have because, things could go wrong if not executed properly, and you might actually have more knowledge than the person making the change. So I think that's so important, is like admitting that you don't know. And I don't think people do that. I don't think people ever like to admit that they don't know something.
Pride, I think it has a little bit to do with it, especially if like, the person's very prideful about the position or thing they do. They're like, no, like I know what I'm talking about. Like in that episode, for example, just to bring it back to that, like that's what it was. It was a little bit of pride. Like I've been working here for years.
Like, I think in that episode too, and I might be wrong, but this is how I've seen it because I feel like I've been in that position, is when you're a young and eager individual entering a dynamic where a lot of the people have been there for years and are much older than you. I always struggled with the idea that I'm young and these people have years on me, so how am I supposed to tell them that this is better? How am I supposed to like convince them that I know something when they probably know more than I am? I feel like age comes into play. People will think, oh, you're in your 20s, you don't know anything. I've heard that a million times, and it drives me crazy because just because I'm young doesn't mean I don't know anything. I haven't had all the time you've had to experience things, but I have spent a majority of my life learning. I mean, you're in school from kindergarten till, if you go to college, till college. So you're in school for like 12 plus 4. Apparently I wasn't in school for 16 years. So you spend the first half of your life learning. And it gets so discredited, like, in the real world. I've been told so many times that I don't know anything. But I was very scared when I worked with a bunch of people that were older than me, because I felt that was always working against me with my age. That people weren't going to take me seriously. And I think that's what happens in the show.
I mean, a part of that is that people don't take, obviously, going back to repeating you again.
Caesar,
No.
Part of that is people don't take younger people serious.
No, part of it is obviously learning from other people.
I want someone to clip, like, all of the time that Caesar just repeats everything that I've said verbatim.
It's because you have so much information and great stuff that you've said. It's like, man.
Thank you.
Just letting you know. You have a lot of great insight. So, but.
It's from all my years.
It's from all your years.
My 24 years.
But with all of that said, change is difficult. It's not easy. Whether it's you wanting to get into, physical activities, go out running, working out, maybe you want to start reading more. We've talked a little bit about this on a previous episode where, whether it's like reading or running or writing or creating, like on your off time, because you want to get somewhere, you have a goal to that you want to reach, And a part of that is changing your habits and its habits too. I think
that I would say too is that from what I was reading, a lot of reason that people hate change, including me, is change is uncomfortable and it brings feelings, and feelings are often uncomfortable to deal with, and you don't necessarily always know how to deal with them. And I know for me, when I was in college, at the end of my freshman year, I hated the person that I was. I was just like, who is this version of me? I feel like if I continued down the path, like, of freshman Sunny, I would have hated myself. But going into my sophomore year, there were a lot of changes I did want to make. Acknowledging that I didn't like myself brought a lot of negative emotions, and it brought a lot of self-doubt and feelings of, can I change? Is it worth it to change? Am I capable of change? Am I going to get to be this person that I actually want to be? And it's just hard to deal with those feelings. It's something that it's possible, but it sucks because you go through a whirlwind of emotions and sometimes you can't see what the finish line looks like.
Yeah.
There's like a certain level of uncertainty, and that also makes you uncomfortable.
Sorry, I just had not a flashback, because it is uncomfortable. It's like, not to say like a bad flashback, but just the amount of times I do remember, like, either me having to make a personal change or try to drive changes within the company or place of work that I had. And that was always the most difficult part, because, again, people were either if they didn't respect you, didn't see what you were doing, like, they wouldn't even listen to you like that. It just reminded me of that woman in the show where she's just like, and then the sabotage. There's a part in the show where she sabotages the girl who's trying to help her change, and it overwhelms her.
I have a question. Do you think, like, bringing that case scenario up, do you think that there are people in your life that sabotage you when you're trying to change personally?
I mean, I wouldn't know if they're trying to sabotage me, like, because, again, I don't know their intentions, unless I knew and saw them, like, personally, like, doing things. But I mean, who knows? I wouldn't know.
I remember, and I don't know if my sister got mad at me bringing this up, but like I said, me and my sister, we have a whole podcast on this. We really didn't get along for a long time. And like I mentioned, after my freshman year of college, there were a lot of changes I wanted to make within myself to become a better person, to become the version of myself that I thought could be happy and could just be who I wanted to be. And so I started making all these changes in my life. But to my sister, from the outside looking in, it looked like it was inauthentic and not who I was, because I was no longer the person that she knew, which obviously she didn't like the person that she knew. And I was becoming someone else. So when we would talk about it, she was like, "You're just lying. This is inauthentic." I remember she told Caesar, we were sitting at lunch with her, she goes, "You're just doing this because you like him, and like this is not who she is." And I remember thinking to myself, well, if she doesn't believe that I can I change? If other people can't see that I'm making these efforts to change, or they don't believe them, am I actually changing and becoming a better person? And I know that's not how I should think, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if people see it or not. Like, your actions shouldn't be based on what other people want from you. But at the same time, it does fill you with a little bit of doubt and kind of make you reflect on what you're doing and whether or not you're capable of moving forward.
That was, I. No, I mean, again, I'm just remembering that whole scene. Like it played back in my head.
Rough.
It was really. It was like if we could shoot like a we should have like one day we'll have your sister come and then we'll have to do like a reenactment of that and do like a story around it. But
when I tell you like
really
this was
bad.
well, let me like just play the scenario down for you. So this was a couple years ago. Me and Caesar had just started dating. This was in March of 2018 because we started dating in December of 2017, and this was the first time Caesar had come to Florida. And even though my sister and I didn't really get along, we decided to go have lunch together. And Caesar was obviously in town.
I got some gator.
We did not get gator that time.
Oh wait, I thought we were trying to get gator.
Well, we were, but they didn't have it, I don't think.
Yeah.
So we're at this local sports bar that my sister actually used to work at, called Frogger's, in my little hometown. And I don't even know how me and my sister got into an argument, but Caesar was just sitting there, and me and my sister are just arguing back and forth across the table, and Caesar is just like there. And Rihanna walks out. I can't even remember if she paid or if I paid.
No, we ended up paying.
Yeah, Rihanna walks out, and I am pissed. Like, I'm crying, I am upset, and I get in the car, and like Caesar's like, let me drive. I'm like, no, like, you're not gonna drive. Like, I'm mad. He's like, Sonny, just let me drive. I'm like, you don't even know where you're going, because this was his first time he's ever visited Apopka. And we just drive, and he was like, he basically said, I don't care like what your sister thinks of you, like, I know the person that you are. And I think the whole reason I was mad during that whole scenario of me and my sister bickering is that I was trying to be a better person, and I thought that if Caesar believed everything that my sister was saying, that he wouldn't like me and that it would be over. And I was like, he's gonna break up with me. And it was so sad. I was so upset. And like, Caesar obviously is a great person, because he was just like, I don't care what she has to say. Like, I know who you are and I know what you're trying to do. And I was just like, oh.
Yeah, I remember that. And that was sad because it was sad to seeing her. Like, she was obviously like really, sad and angry and all these emotions. And I was like, I'm not going to let her drive because that's when accidents can happen, in those situations. So I just remember just driving into some road, like really like off street, just to get away from where we were at. And then we just parked and talked. But yeah, I mean, to get back to that change portion of it though, yeah, I mean, there are people that aren't going to believe you in the beginning until I mean, not to say like there's gonna be outside things that are you're gonna showcase, the fruits of whatever it was that you were trying to change, whether it's in your life or maybe it's of your business or whatever the case is. But yeah, there's gonna be people that always won't believe you, But it's in that we grow a lot in, It's in those like when we're trying to pull the weeds out, and plant a new foundation for us to do those things and be better people. Because I know I'm not a perfect person. I know you're not a perfect person either. And we've all done things, said things to people that may have been rude or whatever the case is. But at the end of the day, as long as you acknowledge that and then like move forward or find a way to move forward, it's a good thing.
I think that it's just for some people, they have that, oh, I'll believe it when I see it.
Mentality.
But even when they see it, they're very skeptical, because there's this saying too. It's something like this, but this is not the quote I was thinking of, but this is a good one. People are stupid. That's it. That's the quote. Just kidding. They will believe a lie because they want to believe it's true, or because they are afraid it might be true. which is not at all what I wanted to
That
say.
I mean, that's
They'll
a
believe
really
a lie.
really good thing to think about.
But people have this perception in their mind of you, and they'll take anything that reaffirms their perception of you, even if that's not who you are. Sometimes there's no changing the way people view you. So even if you're making all these changes in your life, even if you've become a completely different person, done a whole 360, they're not going to believe it because they have this idea of who you are in their mind. And there is no changing that sometimes, which for me was the hardest to deal with because I'm a chronic people pleaser. So when I started making all these changes in my life, I wanted people to know, I wanted people to see I was really putting in the work, but some people will just not care. They'll just be like, no, you're this person and that's who you are. You're never going to change.
They see you for what they either think of you from somebody else,
Yeah.
or from, again, we talked about this their first impression of who they think you are, and the second that you show, oh, that's who that person is, that's, or they look at, this is probably one of the worst ways to look at someone, is like they think they know your family, and because you're related to that family or whatever the case is, then this is why you're that way, like, and that's such a horrible thing to look at, like, whereas I mean, I've always heard this saying before, like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, which I get why people think that, but it's just people are able to change too, so why would you even think that in the first place? I just think we should just judge less. We're all judgmental in some I mean, we are all judgmental at the end of the day, but as long as we judge people less.
Okay, this is what I have to say about judgment, though, and I do think that it kind of goes along with change too. Is yes, inherently, like, we all judge people, but whether or not we voice that judgment is our choice. We can have all the thoughts inside our heads, and we can acknowledge what thoughts we probably shouldn't be having. But if you go ahead and voice that judgment, that's where you kind of cross the line. You have the choice on whether or not you're going to voice that judgment to someone else. And I think it's so shitty to put judgment to do that. Like, in that case, like, yes, we all judge, doesn't make it right. And we do have that option to just not say anything, to hold our judgment inside. We don't have to voice it out to the world, Yeah,
no, we don't. We make the choice, and that's why people, again, there are critiques of people that may not fall directly into the judgment category. However, there are things that you can, like, clearly say, like, why are you saying that in the first place? That's kind of, rude. You do even know that person, to say, in order for you to say something like that, whatever the case is. And yeah, you just gotta think before. It's always. I remember being taught this as a kid. Like, just think before you speak.
Yeah. Literally. And I feel like that's what we lack a lot of times, is just thinking before we say something freaking rude. Like, just don't. I remember having conversations with my mom, and I love my mom. And we're all not perfect, but she would say something and just be like, look, like, let's just not say those things because they don't do any good for us. Like, it doesn't make sense. It's just be nice. I think it's so hard for people to just be nice and, like, understand that people have going on. I feel like even if someone is these to you, just, like, be nice. Like, I think about it, like, in terms of, like, if I had a bad experience at a restaurant, if I had a bad experience in, like, shopping or something, like, I'm not holding it against that person, because I've been that person. I've been there, like, working a job that I hated just to bring home money, and, some days you have bad days, and I don't think anyone, like, takes that into account. Granted, there's not excuses to be a bad person or to be mean, but, we all have our off days. We're all not perfect 100% of the time. We're all actually not perfect at all. So, yeah. I don't know. That's just, I get so worked up about that.
I mean, we kind of touched on one thing I did want to bring up about change too, is like, is change always a good thing? Again, we're humans. We all come from different cultural backgrounds, different upbringings, different ideas, especially here in the U.S., living in the United States. We have the freedom to, like, hopefully we have the freedom of speech, which we still do, I believe. And we can say certain things and be like, what if we did things this way? But in reality, what if that specific change isn't a good thing in the long run, and then we learn from that. We're like, oh wait, you know what? We learned either from history or
Sometimes you don't
whatnot.
learn until you try, and we've talked about this before. But I also think that change is necessary to move forward. Like, if we didn't change, we wouldn't have certain things today. We don't do, like, even space travel is different today than it was back then. And that's like, we're making advancements in healthcare. It all requires change. It all requires a different type of thinking, a different perspective. And I think change is how we make advancements, not just personally, but professionally, globally, it's necessary. Like, if you think about, it's the reason I think that we separate people into generations, because each generation is different and changing, and they're changing given the circumstances that they're growing up in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, you have your, what are they called? Boomers?
There's a whole, they're not called boomers.
It is. They all call boomers.
Well, they're called baby boomers.
But you call them boomers. They're literally, I don't want to get crap for saying boomers, because there literally is a website targeted towards boomers called Boomer Benefits. So,
yeah, I get you. I know.
Let me just say it is okay to say boomers, I think.
No, I know. Again, I understand that. It's just it's a colloquial term, for the baby boomer generation after World War II, I believe. But yeah, no, there's a whole book on that. Neil Strauss, him and somebody else, I can't remember the other guy's name.
I don't know how season.
He wrote the book Generations and described, how each generation. There's at least in the United States, how each generation has its ups and downs, and it's kind of like a circle. I don't know if you ever heard the term good times make. I don't want to butcher this, man. I wish I didn't remembered it, but good times make. Either way, it's a term, but
But it's funny because you look at one generation making fun of another generation, and that generation making fun of this generation, and it's all because they hate the change. They think they're superior and that this is better. But it's like, no, we are just living with the world that we grew up in, and our world was obviously different. So I think some people think, like, I don't know, there was I saw TikTok where someone was like, my dad used to tell me he walked like 8 miles to school and like how good I have it. And it's like, yeah, well, obviously things change for the better. Like, parents make changes to give the kids better, but then they're like, I had to do this. It's like, yeah, but I don't, because you wanted me to have a better life. No, like, isn't that the whole reason that you did this, is so I wouldn't go through the same thing?
Yeah, part of it. I mean, I get you. A part of it obviously is that, but it's just everyone parents their kids differently. It's to instill, hopefully, values that will make them realize, like, oh man, I got.
But that's the whole thing too. Is like, even when it comes to parenting, when you make changes in your parenting style, like, my sister has her daughter, and I'm sure my mom looks at how my sister is raising her daughter, and it's like, oh, that's not how I raised you guys.
I think that happens with every.
But that's what I'm saying. Yeah. But it's because it's different and it's changed, and they're just generation. Like, you guys turned out fine. Why wouldn't you just do the same thing? Or like, you always think, what would I have done differently? So I think, like, at some points, people do wish they would have changed or like done something completely differently than what they did.
Yeah, no, I mean, then it's like, what is it? What's that called? I'm just forgetting certain things right now. I don't know why. But you're just looking back on like things that you did in the past, and you're like, oh man, hindsight 2020.
Hindsight 2020.
That's what I was trying to say.
Wish I had hindsight.
Yeah, is that from The Office, right? Oh my gosh, but yeah. Yeah, again, it's like in that book, it's been a long time. It's really analytical, breaks everything down. But Neil Strauss just breaks down how each generation kind of ends up piggybacking off of each other, and then it ends up coming back full circle. It's like almost like the pendulum,
Yeah.
And like hard times make good times make bad times make good times. That's basically it's like a whole circle where people learn from that.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, it's a different. I might have butchered it there, but it just brings people around where if we all have really good times, then sooner or later it's gonna be bad times, and then bad times it's gonna be good times,
Yeah.
So yeah.
I have a question though. So like, how do you say you're ready to like make change in your life? How do you go about it? What do you think? Like, you're not resistant to change, but you want to change. How do you even go about making those decisions and making those changes in your life?
I mean, I would say personally, like realizing like if there's an issue. I think about it, not to say I mean, I know many of my family members have had like, diseases where either it was cancer or like diabetes, high blood pressure, all those things, right? Like, it's actually friends of my family, unfortunately. But you have to realize, like, it's like when you're sick and the doctor's telling you, hey, you have, diabetes, type 1, type 2, or whatever it is. And in order for you to, for it not to get worse, you need to make these changes in your life. And sometimes it requires you to eat better or eat less sugar or whatever the case is. So it's acknowledging, like, what is it that you need to do in your doctor or doctors, if you wanted to consult more doctors to get a different opinion, tell you need to do this. I think that's when you're like, all right, someone's telling me, someone who knows more about me specifically in this subject. Now I need to make a change in my life. So it's understanding what you need to do. Like,
but do you know those people who like will hear that? Like, for instance, if it is a medical situation, and be like, well, my great grandfather did this and he lived to be 90. So, there's those people. And I think that works against, some of the things that even if you want to make the change, you're like, oh, well, how much is it going to benefit me if I actually do? Because I have this case scenario that reassures that I don't need to make any of the changes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've also heard this. It's funny you bring that up. I also heard like, well, especially when it comes to like some people who are older and like, well, I got a good 10 years in my life. I'm just going to keep doing this, like they'll ask how much time will knock off of your life expectancy. It's like, it's fine. I'll just keep you in the way. And it's for some people like, literally the doctors or multiple doctors, that's why I always recommend get a different doctor, whatever the case is. But they'll tell you that, especially if it comes to like, I mean, cancer is one thing, man. Like, you should try to figure all that out. And sometimes it's like, what can you do? At that point, it's like, yeah, sure, you got a certain amount of life left in you, and that's like I'm talking about cancer, medical stuff.
You can't change.
I mean, especially if it's in certain regions, but.
There's nothing you could have done to change that most of the time.
Oh, no, most of the time, no. Unless you're like putting, some kind of job that puts you at risk, because we're coming to find out like people were literally like subjugated to like chemicals that gave them cancer or whatever the case was. But yeah, I mean, like obviously that's a medical thing, but if it's like a personal growth thing, or like you need to realize like, man, like this is a problem that I'm having, like what can I do to change it? Step one, maybe stop doing that specific thing or whatever, or learn how to go around it.
But I think that's the hard part is say step one is just stop doing this thing. Yeah. How do I stop? Like, especially if it's so inherently routine. I'll give you a great example of something I have struggled with forever. I'm a snacker.
Chronic snacker.
I love snacks. Like, I love hot Cheetos. I love Takis, I love chips, and most of the time I snack out of like stress. Like I get so stressed and I just want like something snacky and salty. So while I work or something. And when I worked at Target, nickel.
I'm gonna have a little jar here. Literally, I'm gonna have a jar here.
I had a whole drawer at my desk full of just snacks. And it was just because every day was so stressful and I needed the snacks. I probably spent so much money on snacks when I worked at Target. And I've been trying to stop. And I realized that maybe it isn't quitting cold turkey, right? It's not just stopping snacking completely, but maybe it's finding healthy alternatives.
Replacement, yep.
And like also not eliminating like the stuff you love either. Like, I don't think you have to eliminate, like, for instance, my hot Cheetos. Maybe just in moderation and not how I'm currently eating them. So that was some good advice I got from Melissa, actually, because I told her, I was like, I have such a problem with snacks. And she was like, maybe just find healthy alternatives. There are a lot of healthy alternatives to, like, snacks.
Yeah.
And, maybe actually listening to my body, like, am I just hungry or am I bored? But I think sometimes the hardest part is just actually figuring out, can I live without this thing, or how can I slowly get away from this thing? And even if it's just not even saying like a physical thing, you're thinking about how you want to feel better about yourself or feel happy or find joy in the little things. It's a change in mindset. And I feel like sometimes changing your mindset is much harder than anything else in your life because it requires seeing things from different perspectives and perspectives you previously haven't. And we have this confirmation bias, and, you know, we're going after things that confirm what we already believe. And so changing your beliefs or changing just how you see things is just inherently hard. It's, I would say, more difficult than making a change to like your daily routine, like going to the gym. I believe all of it is related to your mindset. When you're trying to just change your mindset altogether, it can be difficult, especially for instance if you're dealing with like mental health issues. Like I deal with like anxiety and depression, and I'm currently trying to, feel like rewire my brain, and I'm not sure if it's possible. I'm honestly not, but I'm trying to do things and not change the way I feel, but I don't know, just change your mindset. I don't know how to explain it. You know what I mean?
Well, I think what I'm getting at from what you're saying is like, yeah, change is difficult. And I think I remember reading something years ago about this, how like, I think if you do something that you're trying to change for 30 days, like it's a way for you to like continue that habit.
Well, yeah, that's in like Atomic Habits or
Yeah.
something. But I'm talking specifically about changing your mindset, not just changing a habit, changing your mindset entirely.
Yeah.
If you've believed X, Y, and Z for years, and now you're trying to change those beliefs to achieve some type of goal, it's gonna be difficult because you have to now find reason to change. There has to be good enough reason in your mind.
I think finding like in this case, instead of talking about a habit, you're talking more about like mindset. I've heard this before. Like you need to change in mindset. Like, there's like growth mindset. There's like you need not growth mindset. Like growth mindset. There's the whole like stop being a victim, whatever the case is. You've heard that.
I fucking hate when people say that.
Or the victim mindset or something of that nature. And again, I understand where they're coming from, but for you to do any sort of change like that, it is realizing, it is truly, and I don't know if it's like internalizing is probably not the right word, but like it's looking inward and taking the time of day to realize like, am I really doing this wrong? But then
that's the issue, though. That's the issue, though.
Makes you like feel a certain way. Next thing you know, like you're depressed or something. I don't know. But
no, that's not how depression works.
I don't know. I'm not saying that's how it works. But then people can get sad thinking about like things like that. So
that's the issue, though, is that change, especially a change in mindset, requires self-awareness and self-reflection and looking inwards. Again, it can be hard and it can be ugly.
That's what I'm.
And we don't all. I think a lot of the problems that a lot of people have, including myself, is I'm so much in my head. I'm an overthinker. I'm so in my head and I'm thinking about every little thing. I'm picking myself apart. And that's something I'm trying to change, is that me doing that. But I don't know, making those changes in your mind is just, I keep on saying the same thing. Making those changes in your mind is so difficult because we're so in our heads. We're so in our heads about everything that we do. And there's this book called Get Out of Your Head, and I read it, and it basically said, it was a self-help book, and maybe it's not helpful because I didn't apply it as much, or I'm trying to still apply it, but it says you've got to stop with like the first negative thought that comes in your head. If you can just stop that first negative thought, you can stop all of the negative thoughts, right? But it requires a certain awareness of like when that thought enters your mind, but sometimes because you're so used to the way that your mind works, and because like that's just how you always think, you're not able to stop it at that one negative thought because it comes so quickly that you just don't even realize, that this is something I probably shouldn't be thinking. And I reach out to my coworker Alyssa a lot when I'm feeling like really down in the dumps and like, thinking these like negative things about myself and who I am. And she is always telling me like I need to give myself slack and I need to, just be more, give yourself more grace. And that's something I struggle with. I take that as like, I take it to heart. I'm like, okay, I really do need to make this change in my life, but I don't know how to not feel this way. I don't know how to make that change because I've read these books and I've, watched these videos about how people have epically changed their life by just a change in mindset, but making that change can be not as seamless as everyone makes it to be. I think that's my biggest issue when people talk about growth and change is some people talk about it as if it's just a day and night thing. And it's just a click of a switch. I think it's really, a journey sounds so like cliche, but it is. It won't happen today, it might not happen tomorrow, but every day you're doing something different to get to where you want to be. And I mean, I think personally I've been changing who I am for the last 2+ years, and I'm still not the person I want to be, but I do think I'm different from who I was last year and who I was the year before. There's so many things that I'm changing, and I don't know, I just don't think you'll ever be done. I think it's just a consistent, and sometimes it's a battle for people. I think some people have always had that mindset of, being flexible and adapting, but I think I'm pretty flexible and adaptable. I don't know if that's a word, but
I think that's a word.
I struggle when it comes to, like, in work, I can adapt and I can be flexible, but when it comes to my own life, of being flexible and embracing that change in my own life, it's a complete different scenario. Like, do you ever feel like that? Like, in some environments, you can embrace change, and in some environments, you can't.
I would say yeah, and I have felt that before. It is hard. Don't get me wrong, it is hard. Especially if, like, for example, like, I mean, you said so much. You dropped like a truckload just in the past few minutes. I mean, I would say yeah, it is changing your mindset. It does take time. But if you're one thing I was going to mention is if you're not truly understanding that you're not applying something every day or every week towards changing something that's harmful for you, or whatever the case is, then how are you going to expect to change? Like, if you're just like, oh, I want to be less negative. Let's say someone wants to be less negative, right? They have to acknowledge what they're doing.
You have to acknowledge what's negative.
What's negative, yeah.
What you have to pinpoint, when am I being negative? What's causing me to be negative? And then, like,
well, first I think it's, are you really negative? Like,
yeah,
not internalizing, but realizing, wait, am I really saying this, or whatever the case is? And then once if that ends up being true, because it's not just like, that's the thing, is like you just want to make sure that if someone tells you you're being this way, like, is it coming? First of all, is that statement coming from a place of you actually being that way? And if it is, then you realize, okay, what's going on, and then from there taking steps to like make a change in that mindset. But
the only reason I don't agree with that, though, is because, like, you're changing based off someone's wanting you to change. Mm-hmm. And again, we kind of discussed this earlier, is that you should change because you want to change, not because someone else wants you to change. Mm-hmm. And I think there's different case scenarios where, like, obviously you might have to change. If it's at work and you need to make this change to be more successful or more productive at work, maybe, depending on the scenario, you might listen to that person. But I think for change to be not seamless, but for change to truly happen and to work within yourself, it has to be something you want to do. Mm-hmm. It can't be you're doing it because someone else wants you to do it, because at the end of the day, you'll probably just revert back to
it's not coming from because it's almost feeling like it's forced on you.
Yeah, and it's not coming from a need within yourself. Mm. I think when we realize as individuals the things that we need, we're more likely to make those changes in our lives. Like, I need this, and I need this to get where I want to be. We're probably more likely to make that change versus I need to change because this person wants me to change. This actually brings up a good thing. people, like relationships, for instance, people will get into relationships with people and they'll want to see changes in their partner. But unless their partner wants to change, you're not going to change that person. There's no such thing as changing that person. That person needs to want to change themselves. So it's like, there's the idea, I can fix him. It's like, no, you can't. Because that person has to want to fix themselves. There always has to be a want inside the person for the change to happen.
Again, like you were mentioning earlier, there needs to be like a switch that hits on in their head. But in order to get to that, in order for that switch to, click on, there needs to be things that happen before that. That's why I do kind of relate that. Yeah, there is a way for you to click that switch on in your head to make that change. But there's a bunch of stuff that like that person needs to realize, like, oh wait. And then they try it, whether, for example, I still love running. And it took me a long time to even get into running. I was, not to say like lazy, but I just always thought it was like kind of pointless to just run around in circles and whatnot. But once I realized how beneficial it was for me, I started off walking, and then I started jogging. Then I started getting really good at jogging. Then I started running. Then I started doing 5Ks every day when I would get home from work. And then I realized, like, this is awesome. It's doing really good stuff for my health. And then I needed to set another goal for myself. Like, I need to do 10K. Then I wanted to do my own marathon. And as long as I kept that going, and then it came to the point where I'm being 100% real with you, where I just stopped. Now me and you, we run every now and then, but I do. Again,
I think change though requires having goals in mind and constantly like raising those goals. So for me, I had a similar thing. The only reason I'm gonna be 100% real with you guys right now, the only reason I started running is because when I met Caesar, he said he loved running, and I said, you know what? I love running too. And I had never ran I obviously run in my life, but never ran just for fun and just to, get my steps in. And so after Caesar told me that, I was like, I'm going to run and I'm going to track my runs so he could see when I was running on Runkeeper. And I only did it because I was like, this will make him like me. And it was so bad for it to be that to be the reason, but it ended up being really great for me because I challenged myself more than I ever had in my life to do something that I didn't think I was capable of. So I ran my first half marathon because I started running in college, and after I ran that half marathon, I wanted to run a full marathon, but I also felt super accomplished, and I just stopped.
Yeah, I get you. I understand that. There's not to say a plateau, but in my opinion, I feel like I make excuses when it comes to me not running, and that's something I need to change. Talking about change, right? Acknowledging why is it that I'm
Caesar is a blamer.
No,
he blames things on me.
No.
He goes, Sonny, we need to get up and run in the morning. I'm like, okay, I'll get up. Then he doesn't get up and blames me. I'm like, you could have gotten up. You really could have. And I'm like, okay, so.
I mean, I don't know.
Caesar does. He blames me for a lot of things. I'm like, it's not my fault. You could do it.
Okay. I don't believe that, but it's okay. I'm just joking.
Caesar, how many days did you get up to run this week, huh?
How many days did you get up to run this week? You can go back and forth about this. But anyways, again, I mean, there's other things too as well, obviously. But, I mean, the whole point of me bringing that up, the whole running thing up, was there's for me, it clicked. That's what I was talking about. Yeah. For me, I found that moment when it clicked for me, and I found what I needed to accomplish a simple 5K every day, right? I needed my music. I needed my running shoes. I realized I had a playlist that got me into my tempo. I learned how to become better at managing my breathing so I don't, gas myself out. And I was able just to breeze through that 5K every day and get better and better and start to get faster when it comes to doing that 5K every day. But that took, again, steps. And if you don't start somewhere.
I think that's the other thing. I think that's good too that you mentioned that, is that change ultimately is work.
Yeah, you need to work for it.
It's work. And I think with all the work we already do, in our jobs, some people are just like, I just want to not have to work for this. And not that I don't think it's laziness either, because I feel for the people who just It is. It's a lot of work and it's exhausting. Whether it's mentally exhausting or physically exhausting. Like if you're talking about getting into running, that's physically exhausting. And you might have, for me, the excuse I've made a lot is that I work all day and then I'm tired and then I just want time for me. And you're not thinking about all the benefits it might have. Some people are weighing pros and cons, and the cons just seem to really, outweigh the pros of it, depending on how your mind is at that moment. But ultimately, change is work, and if you don't work to change, like, you won't ever change. You'll
That's
just
true.
be
You just
exactly where you're at.
Exactly.
And it's... There's an episode of The Office. I freaking hate how much I watch The Office. I don't hate it. I love The Office. But where Michael Scott's like, I didn't even have to work for it. It just came to me. And I'm like, it's a joke, obviously. That's why it's funny. But yeah, going back to what my dad taught me is I think he always instilled in me, you got to work for everything you have. And I think it also applies to who you want to be. You got to work for it. No one's going to change yourself for you. No one's going to give you the book to success when it comes to personal change, which is why I also I read self-help books, but I also have a love-hate relationship with them because I think everyone's journey is so different that you can apply what you learned, but at the same time you have different circumstances, different case scenarios. There's not one book that'll point out everything you need to do.
But even then, if there is that one book for that specific person, literally, let's say time travel is a thing, right? Let's say your future self comes back in time right now, walks through the door and is like, I'm you in the future and you need to make these changes. And you're literally seeing the reflection of who you're going to be in the futures. And they're telling you you need to make these changes because X, Y, Z. And here's a notebook with all the notes for you to make those changes. And literally, it's your future self telling you in the past, and your future self telling you in the moment there to make those changes. And it could be coming right from you, and you still need to do the work in order to make those changes.
Well, yeah, but if it's your future self, obviously you got to where you want to be. So why would you need to make the changes?
No, because let's say it's your future self coming back to tell you if you don't make these changes, look at me. This is who I am. And it's the worst. It's the worst person of you. I'm looking this way because there's a door in front of us. So, well, I'm just saying and then in order for you to know that you actually did make those changes, this is a concept of time travel. The future self would disappear the second he handed you the book, because if
I'm confused though, because if your future self was the worst version of you, then you didn't make the changes, so that's your future anyway.
No, because
you're time traveling.
Well, in this version of time traveling, your future self would disappear in a flash the moment they handed the book to you. But if they didn't disappear the moment they handed the book to you, that means that they didn't make the change. You didn't make those changes, and that's still going to be the future.
Time travel.
Time travel. I love time travel. The concept of it. There's a few movies, but I can't remember the name of the movie I'm referring to. But if that change actually happened, they would just disappear, because there's in this concept that I'm explaining to you in this podcast, it's where if you did make those changes, that person didn't have to go back in time to tell you these things.
Oh.
That's why, so they would.
Wait, so you're already doomed?
No, because if you didn't make the changes, he would still exist and come back and give you the book. And if he gave you the book, or he or she gave you the book, you'd be like, okay, but you never made the changes. They're still there. Oh, bro, I'm still here, so you didn't make the changes. So in order for them to disappear and your future self to go away, you would have to actually have done the changes in order for them not to have to spend the money and resources to go travel back in time.
If anyone understood what Caesar just said, please comment on this video, because I am very confused.
Looper. This is a Looper.
Oh, I've seen that.
This is the Looper version of time travel, where they Bruce Willis and I forget the guy's name.
I'm gonna have to watch this movie again.
Such a great movie.
I did not understand it to be like that. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah.
Change is difficult.
Change is difficult, even if you're a time traveler. Change
is difficult, even if you're a time traveler. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. So stupid. How did we even get onto that subject?
Because I was talking about notes given to you.
Because I was talking about self-help books and I mean,
you can have the perfect book for you that's literally written for you, by you, and you still need to do the work.
Gotta put in that work.
Yeah, you still need to do the work.
Which is difficult because we all have like a lot of things going on in our lives, and I think you throw a bunch of changes in that pile, it just becomes overwhelming.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing too for me, is that there have been periods in my life where I wanted to change and I wanted to see the difference a year has, and I wanted to be a certain place a year from now, but I didn't put in the effort to make those changes because they felt so large, you know, in the grand scheme of things. But when you look back, it was just something minor that you needed to change. But I think when you're talking about changes you want to make in your life, no matter how small, they feel ginormous. They feel impossible at the time, whether it's saving money, like budgeting, or
not spending money too.
Yeah, not spending money. I feel like we'll make a million excuses to just not make changes because it's easier than actually making the change. And I know Caesar and I have had these conversations a lot, and I talked to Caesar, I'm like, well, you have to do something because you can't keep on this same road. And I'll be saying this to him, I'll be saying these words that make sense, but I'm at the same time, like, if he were saying the same thing back to me, I would have a hard time hearing it. You know? Yeah. I feel like I'm so hypocritical in that way sometimes with me and Caesar's relationship, where I'm like, I'm telling him what he needs to do, and I literally don't follow my own advice. Because it's so much, that's the other thing. It is so much easier to give someone else the steps they need to take to make changes versus you actually taking the steps. Like, you might understand that this is what needs to happen, but you won't even take those steps to make the change in your life. Because it's so easier to pick apart someone else too.
No, it is. It's a lot easier to see someone else's problems and give them what they need, which is also, you know, that's why even therapists need therapists. You know, like therapists. Like a psychologist, psychologists need their own psychologist, maybe or not, but because they can give great advice based on what they've learned out of years of being a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and then they might still need some help from somebody else to tell them what to do. We still need someone. I think it's a human thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I have a really, like, one of my best friends, she's practically my sister. I love her. Her name is Molly Herrera. I love her. But we've been close for 10, 11 years now. And we've literally been through some of these same experiences. And we've gone back and forth giving each other advice that we both need to take ourselves. That we both need to do. And it's just easier for us to tell the other person, like, this is what you need to do. It's so easy. But even then, I don't listen to the advice. So it's just, you know, it's bad. And that's the thing, is I don't want to be a hypocrite. That's why I always mention that, like, I need work too, and
we all need
it's
work.
way easier to listen to this and be like, oh, they have some good thoughts, and not take them, because I do the same thing. Like, I think so much, honestly. I feel like my brain is always just going at 1,000 miles an hour, whereas, as Mike would say, a mile an hour, that fast. But I don't always take my own advice. I'm not the perfect person. I struggle with change sometimes. I was talking to my manager this week, and a startup is always changing. It's always evolving, which I think is the best, what's it called? Exposure therapy that you can have when you don't like change is working at a startup, because everything is always changing and you have to be really flexible and just adapt to, like, the changes that I'm making, like, every week. And we've had a lot of changes in the company in the past couple of weeks, and we've also had a lot of changes in how my position has evolved. And I think that brought a certain level of just uncomfortability. I don't know if that's a word. Uncomfortability. And I told the manager, I was like, to be honest, I was really scared when we started doing this because I wasn't sure how it was going to work out. And I also have kind of like a trouble sometimes relinquishing control, especially when I'm going to put my name on something. Mm-hmm. So in delegating, I always like to do things myself, but I realized to move forward, I've got to be able to. So I told him, I was like, this is something I thought was was really scary and I was really nervous for, but I'm glad that we did and I'm really liking it. And I wouldn't have known that if we didn't even do what we were doing. And I wouldn't have known that if I would have just been like, I'm out of here. I can't deal with this, you know? And obviously, like, I need that job, so I wouldn't have done that either way. But I also realized in the moment that we're making all these changes, this is good for me. This is going to teach me to accept and embrace. And even if shit were to hit the fan, even if the changes didn't go as well as they went, you have something to learn from it. Like, the next time we do this, we're going to do it differently. So I think it starts with, like, exposing yourself in other areas of life, and you can use it. I now think I can use my experience from work to change personally.
That's true. And it's really great that you even acknowledge that, because some people, they're like, oh, whatever the case is, but there's a lot you can learn from, whether it's through work, a personal relationship, previous relationships. There's so much information that you can gather and apply to not make the same mistakes or whatever the case is.
I think you can also look, and I wouldn't say to compare yourself to other people, but I'm constantly inspired, especially, like, for instance, a lot of people, like, I grew up with, I'm seeing where they're at and how, like, different they are, but different in the best way, and the changes that they've made in their life. I think that's so inspiring, and it kind of makes you believe that it's possible within yourself too. So I always look for inspiration too, because it's not easy, but if you can acknowledge that it's possible, I think that's the first step.
Yeah, I think so too. As long as you know that there is a way for you to make a change, and don't give up on yourself too.
Yeah. I think that's easier said than
done.
It
is easier said than done.
You know, it's
way
easier.
As we said, it is easier said than done.
Yeah. I remember, this is actually funny. This is kind of related. My brother was notorious for quitting things in high school and, like, middle school, sports related. Like, he joined the football team, then he quit, and then he did wrestling, and then he quit again, and then he joined again. And, like, he was just notorious for quitting the things that he, like, enjoyed. He had, like, hobbies, but only for a short period of time, and then he would quit them. And I was more the type of person, like, oh, I'm gonna stick with it, even if I'm not, like, so in love with it. Lucky, like, I love the stuff I was doing, but there's those people that just quit once it just doesn't, like, feel, once it gets hard, or like once it starts to feel difficult.
Yeah.
You know? Have you ever quit something just because it was too hard?
Honestly, I'd probably say yes. I just can't remember exactly what it was, but either it got too hard or too difficult, but I just can't remember what it was. First thing that comes to my mind is, like, a 10,000 piece puzzle. You know,
Puzzles. I hate puzzles.
I mean, I think it's pretty cool to, finally do when you're done, putting the puzzle together.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just something about puzzles that, like, they're daunting, especially the big ones. And it's easy to just give up, when you get all the corners done, and then you're like, shoot, I need to put it all together now in the middle, fill everything in between, and that can be pretty difficult.
Yeah.
So
I think, like, one of the biggest L's I ever took, not L's, well, there's two L's. One was, like, my high school physics class. I was actually just talking to my team about this on our, like, weekly water cooler chat, because I sucked at physics, but I also never really tried to be good at it. Like, I went to tutoring and stuff, but I just wasn't, like, I was like, this is pointless. So I always took the L in that class. Always gave up very easily. But the other thing too was when I was in college, I had, and this is kind of where mindset comes into play. I took this class, I mentioned this before, I took this class 3 freaking times. I failed it 2 times. I didn't pass it till the 3rd time. And in my mind, I was giving myself this excuse. I have too much on my plate, so it's not possible for me to do well in this class. Like, I have it hard. And I was trying to convince the teacher, like, you're making this too hard. And in my mind, that's such a freaking bad mindset to have. I should have, honestly, I could have tried harder, and I could have passed it the first time. But it was all on me because I didn't want to dedicate the time, because I felt like I didn't have the time. And granted, there was a lot on my plate, but I probably could have made the time. You make time for what you want. So I probably could have made the time to pass it the first time, and I just did it. And I look back at that, I was like, Sonny, for one, I had to spend money on the class 3 times. And you know what they do? They charge you more when you have to take the class again. They charge you literally more So I screwed myself in that way. If I would have just tried harder the first time, and granted, it was a hard class, but I made that excuse for myself that this is impossible, so why even try? And I think so many people do that, and I don't blame them because shit feels impossible sometimes. It really does. But it all goes back to mindset and changing that mindset. And I wish I had more advice on how to change that mindset because I truly don't know. I'm still trying to change my mindset into some things.
It's a daunting task.
It is.
It is. It's not, again, like we were talking about. Like I feel like this whole thing. If you took anything away from this podcast so far, it's like it's difficult. It's hard. It isn't easy. But I think for most people, it should be done. It must be done in order for them to improve their lives. It can be done. And it can be done.
It can be done. It's just, again, it goes back to it being an overwhelming. It goes back to it being an overwhelming thing. It goes back to. I think it goes back to time too. Like, how much time do I have to invest in myself? How much time do I have to make myself a better person? Is it going to be worth it? And sometimes we can't picture that. Mm-hmm. We don't have those answers. So versus even trying, we just don't. And I don't blame anyone for not. I honestly think it's, people are who they are. And not saying that people can't change. I do believe 100% that people, actually that's a good topic. I 100% do believe people can change, but I also don't blame them if they can't. I think about how with like the older generations, these people are never gonna change, because they're set in their ways. You've heard that term, set in their ways. And a lot of times, like, what do you think about that? What do you think when you find, like, older, like, the grandparents and elders of our generation, when people say they're just set in their ways? Is that an excuse or is that, like, logical?
I mean, I can see why people would say it is an excuse, but I can also see why people would say it's a logical way of thinking. Again, talking about generations, every generation is this way. When we become 30 years down the line, when we're in their age, there are things that we would have come to know and learn as kids and teens and young adults to being an older adult, right, a senior, and there's going to be things that are going to be told to us when we're older, and then it's a circle, not a circle of life, but it's the whole circle of generations where they're like, things were done this way when I was a kid. I find myself saying that more recently nowadays too, but. And that's why
back in my day.
But yeah, but there are certain things that when they do say certain things, like there's logic behind why they think that way, and that's why some of the values that the older generation have had or have still to this day have been passed down to either their kids and their grandkids, and it's still, some of those values are still instilled in their kids, and some of it can be good. I don't think I think there are things that can be bad, obviously, but that's why I think even the older people, 60s and 70s. I look at my grandmother, for example. I'm thankful that she's still alive, and whenever I do have a chance to, go to Mexico and see her, I think of questions to ask her of like when she was a young kid. And like the crazy stories, like, man, it's insane, especially living in rural Mexico.
The thing is, I can understand why, like, the older generation is the way they are because they, like, how they grew up. But I also don't think it's an excuse to not, like, accept changes that are happening in the world or around you. For instance, I had a conversation about, my generation and how my generation is so lazy, they don't want to work. But I told the person, I'm not going to say who it was, I told the person, I said, I don't think that it's not my generation's lazy and that they don't want to work. They've just put 2 and 2 together that if I'm going to spend 40 to 60 hours working a week, I'm going to do something that I actually want to do because you spend so much of your life working. I don't think it's a strange idea to want to do what you love. Yeah, and again, we've talked about you've got to make ends meet, but I think this generation, and usually the generation that I don't claim, Gen Z, just kind of realizes, even kind of the generation before us, that there are certain things we can't accept. And just because it's always done that way doesn't mean that's the best way to do it.
I mean, every generation's been that way.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying. You go back again, before the millennials, it was Gen X. Gen X. Yeah, Gen X. I think was it 87 or something like that. It was when it ended. Even then, there were certain changes that were going on, you know, globally, then nationally, in communities, depending on where you lived in the United States. And if you talk to them about stuff that's going on now in the U.S., whatever it is, culturally, politically, whatever the case is, you'll find that a lot of people disagree with each other. Even still to this day, they're like, in my time, we were doing this. It's like, so even that's what I'm saying is when we get older, and the next generation after Gen Z, I forget what it's going to be called after that, Alpha or whatever, or I forget the name of it. No idea. But anyways, they're going to grow up, you know, they're growing up now, they're babies right now. And when they get, you know, to voting age or whatever the case is, they'll be like, wow, like I see things differently than from what the Gen Z was telling me to do or whatever the case. And there, again, it's like a whole no,
circle. But that's what, but like I'm saying too, is that, so yeah, we've just learned and we're willing to accept certain things and not accept things that have maybe been accepted before because we're coming at it with new knowledge and different perspectives. And I think, yeah, it's just different. Like, you know, it's just.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people can come at things with different perspectives, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, again, it's a mindset thing. It's
But is that I'm guessing, but I'm asking, like, is that mindset okay? Like, is it okay to just be like, I'm not going to change? Like, I'm not going to change with this new information.
I mean, again, it all depends on the information, right? So whatever topic or whatever it is, right? There's the logical way of looking at it, whatever it is. And then there's the rational way of looking at it. And then there's obviously the emotional way of looking at it. So if there's somebody's bringing you information and it's all based on emotions with no logic or rationality behind it.
I'm not talking about that. Like, I'm talking about like literally.
Is a change going to be next? I mean, well, the whole point of me bringing that up is because if a person's looking at it and they're like, oh, I've looked at all the information and I'm still going to stick to what I've known best, like that's their choice and their decision to make.
But do you think that's, I'm like, take it in perspective to the episode of The Bear we were watching. She was changing just because she didn't want to change. Because she didn't want to look at any of the things that that girl had to say because she was younger or because she's been there forever, you know. Is that okay to do?
No, I don't think. In that specific episode where this older woman, obviously her excuse was, I've been here before you were born.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And that's a common thing people do.
But that's what I'm saying is that because people are not willing to change or accept new information because something has always been done this way. You know?
No, but obviously in that specific episode, we're talking about a restaurant and their processes of, you know, making food and whatnot. And for some, they would rather, you know, I mean, not to get too technical with the episode, but like she saw it as like this person probably doesn't know what they're doing. But after she showcased in that episode that, oh wait, you know what? Like I can see why she wanted to do these things this way because it's more efficient. And then she ended up burning something that she didn't make it right
because she didn't want to listen.
Because she didn't want to listen, and that's what I'm trying to say.
And that's, I mean, even if you put it into like different perspectives, like for instance, like the workforce is very different now. You know, for when we have remote work, hybrid work, we have like people who are doing 4-day work weeks. When the traditional was like you work 40 hours a week, 9 to 5, and that's how you do it. That was like traditional, but even when people are now deviating from that, and even when people are now deviating from that, there's such, you know, resistance from like usually like older leadership to accept the kind of values that the current workforce wants, whether it's a limited PTO or a flexible like work like setup, like whether it's hybrid or remote. People are very hesitant because they think it's going to change productivity, but there has been numbers where it's like it doesn't. You know, they want to make arguments that it does, but at the same time, it's like there's success stories of like, for instance, my company, we're full remote. There's a lot of opportunity there, but because it's not what was traditionally done and, you know, it's just not like how it used to be, people are hesitant towards that change.
Well, I mean, it's funny because remote work isn't a new thing. I remember watching Stranger Things reminded me of this because there's an episode in the new season. I forget Will's mom. she's the job that she has is remote. She's
It's like a telemarketer.
she's a telemarketer. There's been telemarketers where you work from home, you make calls, you do these sales, and instead of the internet, you're using a landline, which is, I mean, technically it's still the internet, but that's what I'm saying. It's been around for years. Like,
yeah, but it wasn't a new thing, but it was new thing on the scale that it was.
On the scale,
it was forced upon people during COVID, but the second that they could get away from it, a lot of companies wanted people to go back into the workplace because that's what they were comfortable with. They were fearing a loss in productivity if people weren't in the office. But I'm like, you just had 2 years where people showed you that things were working. So why do we have to change, like, you know, just because you feel more comfortable with being in the office 24/7. But even with like those changes, people have been hesitant to make changes to how they see work and how they see, you know, how they see success. You know, I think, yeah, I just think I have strong feelings about that too, because I mean, I'm on LinkedIn all the time, and a lot of people do talk about like remote work and how much they love it, and like, but then there's companies that are like, oh no, like, or even when you're looking at, I know you've been looking at like job listings, but I look with you at like the video editor job listings, you know, I'm looking at their benefits, because there's certain like things that I'm like, okay, well, if you're only going to pay me this, you got to have these benefits, you know, like it's not going to make sense if they don't have certain benefits for you. And yeah, I mean, it's just interesting. I told like someone, I was like, I think I was telling your brother, I was like, I would never now not work for a company that's not remote, that doesn't have unlimited PTO, and like doesn't have the benefits I currently have.
Yeah.
Because those are so core, those benefits are so important. And I think if companies honestly just made some of these changes, they'd see people wanting to work for them. They'd see people wanting, even if it was like a strange, odd job, it's all about like what that company has to offer at the end of the day too. And the problem is that some companies just don't want to make those changes. They don't want to invest, or some just don't want to feel like they're losing money, you know?
No, and I get that. Oh, I understand that. But obviously, there are some things that you can't do remotely, you know, when it comes to like maintenance of things.
But but then in that case, it's like you could offer benefits to make it like more appealing. For instance, truck drivers make bank. It's like they make bank, and it's because a lot of people don't want to be a truck driver and live that life because you're on the road all the time.
Yeah,
I mean, I have a uncle who's a truck driver, and he makes good money, and you know, but they have to have those incentives though too, because not a lot of people want to do that. And I think more people would do that. More people would do that though if they found out I could make X amount of money, I could have these benefits, and this would be taken care of for me.
I mean, there are jobs that are like that. It's just, I don't think they're well marketed enough. I mean, I remember someone talking about like, I mean, now it's like a job podcast, but you know, like welders, like offshore welders, you know, crane operators, you know, oil.
What are those people called that do the power lines?
Oh, line workers. Oh man, like that's
especially in Florida. Oh my God, those people got to go out after
line
like a
workers,
storm. Crazy.
They get hazard pay, and I mean, I think those jobs are going to be the ones that are going to be more and more difficult to find people to do them, because just people want to. I mean, not to say Gen Z is lazy. It's just that people
don't
people try to do things. Well, want to do something that they love to do, like you're saying. But being a line worker is very difficult to do. It's like being a doctor.
But that's what I'm saying though too. Is like it is difficult. Like for instance, I would never. I have someone in my family that like constantly like sells the Air Force. You know.
Oh yeah.
Like join the Air Force, and I'm like, you don't want me to fight for this country. I'm just gonna tell you that you do not want me. Like, I don't trust me with that, and I wouldn't be good at it. Like, there's just things like when you talk about being a line worker, it's difficult. I might not be good at it. You might not want to put me in that situation.
That's what I'm saying. Is that
so I think there are specific people that would be something that they could do because they're good at that thing. Yeah. I just couldn't, like, I want to have fear of heights. So I think that would scare me a little bit. But yeah, and then in the army, like, you wouldn't want me in the army.
Oh, so I'm saying is that I don't expect everyone to be like, line
and the
workers,
way they sell people on it, though, is that they give them, like, free school, but not until after you serve. And, like, at the same time, it's like, well, if I just waste all this time, why do I want to go back to school? Like, it's just so, I don't know how. I couldn't. I honestly couldn't.
Oh, yeah. When we talked about how recruitment numbers are down, so. Yeah, they're having a difficult time.
Someone tried to recruit me once. I was working at Target. Nickel.
I
I was working at Target and I was like in Tallahassee and I was changing like the stuff in the registers. I was closing down because it was close to the end of the night. And he hands me his card. It's like say he was talking to one of my team members, and then he leans down and hands me his card as if I'm like, do I look like I could be a part of the army, sir? Like, do I really look like that? Because no, I couldn't. I was like, I am weak. I don't want to shoot a gun ever. And yeah, so I was like, if there's ever a draft, you are screwed with me.
Well, so far you'd be fine because you're a woman, so.
Well, yeah.
Women don't have to be drafted. Hopefully never, but hopefully
I think
whatever.
they might change that though.
No, they were trying to, but it got rejected.
They said we won't be that desperate, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, we have enough able-bodied men to fight. Well, hopefully there's never another world war, even though we're currently in one right now. I mean, we aren't currently physically in one, but we're helping one. But I don't know. That's a whole other podcast on that.
Yeah.
Different podcast, not this one. But yeah, change difficult.
Change difficult.
And sometimes you need to make a change.
That was the most generic thing
I
ever.
don't know.
See, sometimes you need to make a change, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You just change.
Just change.
Just change, Caesar. So stupid. Well, I think that's been today's episode. In the wise words of Caesar, just change, guys. Just make the change.
If you need to make the change, make the change. Now. Do it.
Do it.
Just do it.
Just do it. Yeah, change is just something, it's necessary to move forward, I believe. But like everything we discuss in this podcast, it's way easier
said than done. I
feel like that's everything in life. Everything is so much easier said than done, which doesn't give us a lot. But, I believe in you guys. I know Caesar believes in me, hopefully. I believe in Caesar. And I think that we're all capable of not just making changes in our life, but becoming the person that we want to be and, loving ourselves and the person that we become. So I would say just put your best foot forward.
Best foot forward.
Best foot forward and just take it one day at a time. That's honestly all you can do. And I think on my hardest days, that's just what I remind myself is take every day, one day at a time. I stress about the future all the time, but honestly, you just got to go one day at a time. Do you have any wise words, Caesar?
I mean, about change is just got to make the change. Make the change. Take it a day at a time.
Caesar's so...
I did that one on purpose. But no, just honestly reflect, self-reflect. If you have people that you're around you that you trust, talk to them about what you're thinking about changing. And
have patience and don't be scared. I mean, obviously it's easy to say don't be scared about change, but it can be scary, and just know that someone hopefully is there for you. If not, we'll be there for you.
We'll be there for you. I was literally gonna say
I'll be there for you when the rain starts to fall. I love that. But yeah, this has been Growing Together with me, Sunny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
We're so glad that you guys made it to the end of the episode. If you did, I hope you really did. We love doing this podcast every week. We release episodes every Monday. It should be available on most podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, and all the other random ones that there are. We love you guys. We're now 34 subscribers strong. Woo! So we love all 34 subscribers.
And if you found us from shorts, please leave a comment down below.
Yeah, I think it's the shorts, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can't wait to record our next episode and see you guys next week.
See you guys later.